well-educated, a liberating education, oh, that's when things happen in a true education. You have changes in attitude. You have changes in the way you live. More than just memorizing facts. How do you tell if someone's well-educated? Or better yet, how do you tell if you yourself are well-educated? You're at a gathering. It used to be called a cocktail party, but I don't think they drink cocktails much anymore. I'm not sure. But you're there at the party. There's the rocket scientist talking about the angular momentum generated when the counter thrusts rockets denuberate or something like that. And then in another corner, the gemologist is going beyond cut and clarity and carat and color, and is talking about the composition of some obscure purple rock. The composition could be the chemical formula for mace, for all we know. In another corner, the securities dealer is urging you, you've got to take a long position in a TED spread. We've got to worry about the straddles and the splits and the moving 200-day average of the euro yens, and make sure they don't meet in some double negative criterion. You call them all over to your corner. That rocket scientist and gemologist and stockbroker. Sure, angular momentum and chemical formulas and TED spreads, they can be serious stuff, along with football scores and those kinds of things. But let's talk about, you tell them, something that is central to all of our lives, central to what it means to be a human being. Ask them, is there more to life than a good job, pleasant conditions, well-paying, a house and family, an early retirement? Ask them, is there anything you believe strongly enough in that you would urge your children to die for? You know, the old question is, would you die for something? But is there something you believe in strongly enough that you'd urge your children to die for? Yeah, ask them even, do you tell your children stories? Are your children worth the time? Do you tell them stories about men and women who have lived and maybe died for things that you consider important? After all, who dies for a standard of living? The rocket scientist and the gemologist and the stockbroker may have wandered off back into their respective corners so they can hold court and impress everybody. Maybe a little kid in jammies wanders in, rubbing her eyes, and the kind with little bunnies on their feet. And sees Uncle Stanny, hops up on my lap. She might have had a bad dream. And she asks questions. When will the monsters go away? Or she might ask, why did my puppy die? And maybe those kinds of questions are the most serious and profound questions of the evening. There is a scientific way of thinking, and to be well educated is to have that scientific way of thinking as one of the tools at your disposal
Can a scientist be emotional? Yeah, sure. Sure. When they find a thrilling discovery, it's not unusual to see them bouncing around the lab. But the opponent that the scientist faces across the chessboard is often exceedingly subtle. Her name is nature. If we, each of us, you and I, acting as scientists, if we are to discover her secrets to win at that chessboard game, to win pieces, then there is a method, the scientific method, which we have found to be exceedingly effective. The computers, the cars, the cameras that we have today are a result of that method. What is that method? Why are smallpox and polio but dim memories? The scientific method, and used as the basis, in that scientific method we use thinking, ratiocination, cogitation, reasoning, lucubration, pondering. When we let our emotions dominate, then nature easily withholds her secrets. When this couple pounds of gray jello is used for what's called glandular thinking, bursting with hate and malice and superstition, fear and prejudice, or football mania, we might as well go back and start burning more witches. We might as well go back and tell Galileo we won't see his moons of Jupiter because we won't look through his infernal telescope. We won't discuss the possibility of a correlation between race and intelligence. We won't examine whether Head Start program makes any significant difference except maybe to the pocketbooks of the taxpayers. The scientific method means that we will look, we will think, we will test our guesses, we will experiment to confirm or deny our hypotheses. If we are the heirs of the scientific method, I suspect that maybe we might feel a little uncomfortable if every idea we have is shared by the majority of the people we know.
Like my shirt? It's a yacht. Economics. You want to buy my shirt? Well, there's several ways you can get it. There's the old-fashioned way. Robbers and governments. You can threaten to use force. Most robbers and most governments don't have to carry out their threats. They just point their gun at you and smile and say, either that or you suffer. And most victims go along with it. Or if you want my shirt, you can offer me to trade me for something I would like Aunt Mabel's blueberry pie recipe. Or you can offer to trade me some of those Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve. You know the Federal Reserve, how long they've been around? Not that long. They were born over there in Jekyll Island in 1913. Got together, and now they got their little monopoly, printing those little greenback notes. I got me an idea. I want to print some bluebacks. Well, how to do it? How to bust open their little monopoly that the Federal Reserve has got? Oh, of course, we have to suppose for a moment that they will release their little tentacle hands and let us have a little bit of freedom from their monopoly stranglehold. You know, a little freedom, a little liberty. Well, being a bank would be easiest from printing my little bluebacks. I'm going to call my bank the Friedrich A. Hayek. Hayek was his last name. The Friedrich A. Hayek Bank. Friedrich, of course, won the Nobel Prize in 1947 for economics. And my little Hayek Bank will take in deposits and issue little bluebacks. I think I'll put a picture of Friedrich Hayek on my bluebacks. That'd be nice. Friedrich wrote a book after he won his Nobel Prize in 74, and it was called The Denationalization of Money. And his ideas, at least some of them, are what I've got here. So let's see, I'd take in gold deposits. Bring in your gold, and my blueback would read on the face of the note itself and say there that this blueback is redeemable for 1 gram of gold. That's about $14 greenbacks current exchange rate. And anytime you wanted to, you'd bring in your bluebacks, but you put 6 of them on the counter there, and I'd push over 6 grams of gold onto your side. Those bluebacks would be as good as gold. It would be fun to watch what's going to happen. We look at the Federal Reserve printing their greenbacks, flap, 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 all the way through their printing presses as fast as they can print them, it seems. And what are those greenbacks backed by? Nothing. You can't take a greenback into the Federal Reserve and trade it for anything. Years ago, when I was a kid, you could. They were called silver certificates then. You could bring them in and trade them for silver. Since then, they've changed the name on those things, and they're called Federal Reserve notes now, and they have no physical backing. Some people call it garbage money. Since 1967, that isn't that long ago, some of you were born before then, those greenback garbage money Federal Reserve notes have dropped in value by 80%. They're worth 1/5 of what they were in 1967. If you were a millionaire in 67, you'd have to be a 5 millionaire now to have the same purchasing power. My bluebacks would be an embarrassment to those greenbacks that the feds present. Back when the Federal Reserve came into being, 1913, 28 of my bluebacks would have bought a good tailored suit. Today, a little over 80 years later, if my bluebacks had been started then and now,
28 bluebacks would have still purchased a good tailored suit. No change. You want to get a home loan? Welcome to the home loan. I'll give you a home loan. You want to do it in terms of greenbacks, Federal Reserve note money, bucks. You do it in terms of that. You borrow $80,000. You pay, say, 9% interest. And your interest costs would be $600 a month for borrowing $80,000. Now, what would be the interest rate? Borrow $80,000 in bluebacks from the Hayek Bank. The interest rate, since Hayek money, bluebacks, are not deflating or inflating, they're not changing in value, the interest rate might be half of what it would be. You'd borrow $80,000 and pay maybe 4.5% interest. That means instead of paying $600 a month interest because of those cheapening greenbacks, you'd be paying $300 in bluebacks a month. Bluebacks, real money, provided competitively, just like computers or candy bars are in our world today. Think about it. Why not? Why not? Because the Democrats and the Republicans would be too embarrassed. The Libertarians are not in that group because they support gold-backed money. But the Democrats and the Republicans couldn't stand it. Hence, one less freedom, one less liberty for you. Great literature. There's a wealth of information, but more than information, there's a wealth of understanding and of feeling, an integration of the entire human experience when you read the great texts. Not everybody likes children. I do. I've taught Vacation Bible School on many occasions and play with kids at the church when I'm there and in a restaurant or anywhere. I like them. And this poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who lived in the mid-1800s, speaks to me. Between the dark and the daylight, when the light is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupations that's known as the children's hour. I hear in the chamber above me the patter of little feet, the sound of a door that's opened, and voices soft and sweet. From my study I see the lamplight, in the lamplight descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra, and Edith with the golden hair. A whisper, and then silence. Yet I know by their merry eyes they are plotting and planning together to take me by surprise. A sudden rush from the stairway, a sudden raid from the hall, by 3 doors left unguarded, they enter my castle wall. They climb up into my turret, over the arms and back of my chair. If I try to escape, they surround me. They seem to be everywhere. They almost devour me with kisses. Their arms about me entwine, till I think of the Bishop of Bingham in his mouse tower on the Rhine. Do you think, O blue-eyed banditti, because you have scaled the wall, such an old mustache as I am is not a match for you all? I have you fast in my fortress, and will not let you depart, but put you down into the dungeon in the round tower of my heart. And there will I keep you forever, yes, forever and a day, till the walls shall crumble to ruin and molder in dust away. Oh. Welcome to our segment on health. You know the stuff you're supposed to do, most of it, to achieve vibrant health. You know, exercising, eating right, eliminating the harmful effects of stress in your life, having the mental attitude that goes along with good health, having goals that are outside of your own selfish, inside, all-for-me type self, or another thing that helps have long life. You know the things you're supposed to do, don't you? Yeah, you do. I do. But it's getting from knowing those things to getting out there and exercising and the rest. Sure, you have to read, you have to listen, you have to plan. But at some point, hopefully before your first heart attack, you'll do as Goethe, the famous German poet, wrote, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it."
You want to buy a phonograph? Here's an ad from a magazine about 15 years ago. Phonographs. And they had old classic art in that advertisement 15 years ago. These pieces of art that they had in there, I suspect, were meant to be recognized. Everybody knows the Mona Lisa and her famous smile, perhaps because of the music that was written about it. And then there's somebody's mother, grandmother. And then the last one, this man and this pregnant woman. That's the one I want to talk about today. It's a picture that's in most art books. It's Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride. 1434, in the 1400s. 1434. He was an Italian banker, and he was up in the northern part of Europe, and he probably was sending this painting home, some of the scholars think, to record his marriage. But what makes this picture? Well, it's both fun and it's special. And let me talk about both of those. First of all, why is this picture fun? Well, it's a marriage, a wedding. And I guess number one is, as you can tell, she's pregnant. It reminds me of, I think it was Irma Bombeck, who talked about today's modern society in which in a maternity ward a wedding ring is a kind of a status symbol. Well, that's here she'll have a wedding ring in her maternity ward. Marriages in the 1400s were not often held in churches. Most often they were held in homes. And here we have a wedding that's being held in the home, and there's apparently a whole ton of symbolism in this picture. So this was in the 1400s. That's, let's see, about 3.5, 4.5, 5.5 centuries ago. Some of the symbolism has been lost. We don't know what it means. Some of it we can guess at, and some of it we know. For example, the pooch down at the bottom of the picture, that supposedly stands for fidelity in the marriage. The mirror in the background
supposedly stands for purity. And if we take a closer look at that mirror, we can see reflected in it, if you look really closely in one of the original reproductions more, the painter, the artist, Jan van Eyck, is the man who painted this picture of Arnolfini and his bride. And we can see other witnesses to the ceremony that are in that picture. The oranges that are sitting on the windowsill on the left side of the picture, they stand for fertility. And given the fact that she's pregnant, I guess the oranges worked. Those are the things that are kind of fun in the picture. But there are things that make this painting special. Things you sort of have to be told about, because just looking at the painting itself without the background, you wouldn't know. For example, the most important one, I guess, is realism. You compare this picture of Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride with, let's go back about a little bit over 100 years to 1311, from 1434 to 1311, and look at this altarpiece that was painted. It's kind of drab, and the people are, some of them are big, some of them are small. There's no perspective. They're more symbolic than real. Or this other picture with the same comments. Another thing, in this use of realism that Jan van Eyck put together as we approach the Renaissance, or in the Renaissance, was his use of light. Now let's look at this, the woman in 1311, or the one about that time, 100 years before. Look at the light on her face, and now compare it with the light on Giovanni's face. Or the light that's bouncing off the brass chandelier in the same picture at the top of the picture. There's light. There wasn't before, not in the same way. The realism. In this picture we see real shoes. We see a real fluffy dog that looks fluffy. We see real cloth that looks like cloth. Oil painting had been known for about a century before Jan van Eyck, or Jan van Eyck, I'm not sure how you say it. But he was one of the first painters to really use it. And he needed to use it in order to get realism that you wouldn't get from the water-based paints and the other media that were used. He could get rich colors, he could get dark darks, and he could get things that look like light reflecting off the brass of chandeliers. The Renaissance, the time we're in, at 1434, with realism. The eye was used. The brain was used. People were seen as they are. In one word, we had reality.